Greetings today. We continue part 2 of Jehovah Olam, the everlasting God. We want to take a little time concerning the testing for Hagar and Ishmael. In Genesis 16, Hagar is forced to flee from Sarah's cruelty with the son which she conceived by Abraham, according to Sarah and Abraham's plan. There is no record of consulting God in this matter in His Word. In Genesis 16, 7 through 11, we find one of the many Old Testament Christophanies, that is, the pre-Bethlehem appearances of Jesus Christ, where Hagar is reminded that her son, Ishmael, would not die in this wilderness. Rather, God would make of him a great nation for Abraham's sake. Although mother and teenage son had been cast out by Sarah and Abraham, with God's authorization according to Genesis 21, 14 through 16, God appears to promise with a promise to take care of them. This child was not 17 days old, nor 17 months old. Rather, he was 17 years old. Now, one would think that the mother who had labored as a handmaid to Sarah and a 17-year-old son could survive. The text would imply more than a physical inability to provide for themselves. Possibly this was emotional in nature. That is a state of distress, or what we call today depression. Abraham, as we have recently studied, seemed to be content with Ishmael to be his heir when God announced the birth of Isaac in the coming year. Maybe Hagar and Ishmael's hope of such happening had just been crushed. Sometimes in the midst of great conflict in our lives, we forget the promises which God has made to us. This seems to be the case here, or else they were hearing it for the first time. But knowing the makeup of the 17-year-old mind, I anticipate there was a lot of whining going on. A great pity party was happening, and lots of blame being shifted to any and everyone that could be thought of. Ishmael surely believes that this, quote, punishment is a little too harsh for just making fun of a little boy. I was only kidding, Yet God calls to Hagar to affirm or reaffirm the promise which he had made. He shows her a well of water. He provides for their sustenance in the wilderness, and the promise of the separation is then revealed. God would make a great nation of both Ishmael and Isaac, but Ishmael would not be an equal heir with Isaac, and that's a simple decree by a sovereign God, which the descendants of these men are still in conflict over today. The first verse of our text states that it came to pass at that time. That is, concurrent time with Hagar and Ishmael's departure, a strife arose over a well with Abimelech and Phicol. This was a significant well. It was a masonry well, 12 1/2 feet in diameter, and that makes it 40 feet in circumference. Abraham had built it, but Abimelech's servants had violently taken it away. So that brings us to the God of everlasting existence. I love the verse in Deuteronomy 29:29 where it says, "The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. But those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law." This verse teaches us that God knows things which we do not know. It also tells us God knows things which he has not chosen to tell us. But it also says God has told us everything we need to know to do his will. The concept of an eternal supernatural being with whom rests unrevealed knowledge is at the very heart of this name, Jehovah Olam, the everlasting God. In the 90th Psalm, verses 1 through 4, which is called a Psalm of Moses, Moses tries to express the eternality of God. It says in verse 1, in the introduction of prayer of Moses, the man of God, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Thou turnest man to destruction and sayest, return, ye children of men. For 1,000 years in thy sight are as but yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Notice Moses said to all generations. Think about that. The same God who walked and talked with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is still the God of our generation. God is not dead, as some have been claiming for years now. God is not diminished in his capacity in the least manner. You know God is still on the throne, regardless of what form of government exists in the nations of this world, and no matter who is the head of that state.